Welcome back to the Neo Marketing Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that's back in the news, and that is ethics in the practice of public relations.
Welcome to the weekly Neo Marketing Podcast, featuring one half of the Golden Group C-Suite, Kyle Golding, and Pritchard, APR, PRSA Fellow.
Kind of an old story, but back in the news as of Monday.
It keeps coming back like a boomerang.
Bell Pottinger, a British firm, known for representing despots and rogues, had a nice little run stirring up racial tensions in South Africa, ultimately resulted in their total demise and bankruptcy.
Good for them.
Absolutely. And a story in the New York Times. The problem with that story is that they labeled themselves a public relations firm, and as our chair, Tony D'Angelo, said in a letter to the editor earlier this week, he said, hashtag not our PR.
Right.
And it's time that, we've been doing this for a while, but it's time now to have some really serious discussions about ethics. Richard Edelman a few months ago was calling for a global ethics code. I think the PRSA Code of Ethics is a pretty strong one. A group of public relations firms called the Global Alliance gathered again in Madrid here recently to talk about a global ethics code. PRSA has jumped on that, but it's really time to get pretty serious about the discussion.
Hey, if you're going to call yourself a professional, if you're going to be a profession, if you're going to have a career in something and you're going to take it at that level of professionalism, ethics has to be absolutely the bedrock of what you're basing everything your decision making on.
I think that this newfound advocacy is going to be very helpful to a lot of folks. The term spin doctor just makes my skin crawl when I hear people call us that. But and we've sat and we've took it as a profession for quite a while. Now it's time to stand up and go, hashtag not our PR.
So there's a huge difference between putting out factual information that is maybe sort of pushing back on non-factual or misunderstood or misconstrued or cherry-picked information, whether it's politics, business, community action, etc. That's completely different than you doing the cherry-picking, the non-factual, the just making stuff up, the spin work instead. And that's where, as
almost made me come across the table, dude.
But that's where, if we're going to call ourselves professional, if we're professional communicators, if we're PR professionals, you have to draw the line with the client or with the boss and say that's not how the world works.
Absolutely.
And be willing to lose your job over it.
Absolutely. And I tell my students there will come a time in everybody's career where you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to do something your bosses said that you know was unethical, or if you're going to step away from it. And it gets real tough when you get college loans, you got the car payment, you got the mortgage, you got the kids. But you absolutely have to have that line in the sand that you will not cross.
I've had it happen twice in my career. And I've been in communications now about 18 years, and I've owned a business for 30-something because I started as a teenager, right? But as a professional communicator, one time specifically I got up and said, if you do this, I'm walking out. Yep. Walked out 1 second later, was very emphatic about it. Best decision I made. It moved me on to other things that worked out well. Another time, pushed back on a boss and pushed back on a boss. They ended up going around me and getting it accomplished anyways, and it ultimately led to some other decision-making processes that walked me out the door there. Less so specific in the day and time, but it did happen. It ultimately pushed me to a better situation. I got both times when other people in the industry heard my stance on ethics, they lined up to hire me. So
absolutely.
There's the short term. Anytime you quit a job or walk off of anything or tell a client we're not going to work together anymore, boy, the panic of how am I going to support my family is really palpable. But not doing it leads you down a path where you'll never get paid by anyone again. But sticking to your ethics, you can always walk behind your ethic code.
Absolutely.
It has always worked out well for me in the long run. Hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
So if we can do anything today, convey to folks, especially our younger professionals, that you do have to stick when someone says something and immediately the hairs in the back of your neck stand up and you go, oh no,
right.
Follow that gut feeling.
Follow your gut, absolutely. There's nothing where you still have to look at yourself in the mirror every morning.
Absolutely. And you have to, you can't just send resumes out around the world, right? People are going to follow up on you. They're going to look you up. The internet is beautiful because you can find every bit of information there is. And if your name is tagged to a scandal, if it's tagged to doing some spin that everyone on the planet saw was completely spin and false, are doing something that ultimately, and everything gets found out, gets found out, and someone can go,
there's no place to hide.
What about you?
Yeah.
And even if you were just there, even if you just let it happen around you, you get lumped into it.
I was close to the pinnacle of my career. I'd been promoted to captain. There were only 17 of us in the Navy, and I'm standing in front of my 4-star Air Force general's desk, and he asked me to do something and I knew was not right. And I made a decision at that point. I was going to take those little birds off if I had to.
Right.
Fortunately, he listened to me, he respected me enough to listen to my guidance, and we didn't go down that path. But
which is the second half of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
As PR professionals, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably some sort of communication professional, marketing, advertising, PR, something, or just a business owner. But if you're going to call yourself a professional, when the client or the boss or customer even wants you to do something that you know is not right, you must push back and educate them on the better alternative.
Absolutely.
Even if it is admitting that you're wrong, admitting you made mistakes, admitting, now your legal team is going to tell you not to admit the things that are going to get you thrown in jail, and I understand those things. But admitting mistakes or failures or shortcomings or something that just didn't work out the way it was intended is so much quicker, better, and easier to manage from a PR perspective.
Right.
That's our job as professionals, is to communicate to our clients and to our bosses. I know you want to cover this up, but let's admit it, let's get in front of it. What is it you say? Go ugly early?
Go ugly early. Bad news, unlike a fine wine, does not get better with age.
So don't stand up and walk out the very first minute they say, let's do this. You need to coach them through what they should do as an alternative. Now, once they insist and they go, I'm the boss, you're going to do this, you have to make a decision.
And
you
make
stay or
the
you
call.
go.
I tell my students that they have 2 obligations. The first is to have the guts to say no, and the second is to push back. You get one but, sir.
Yes.
And if you're not convincing, and hopefully you've been playing a counselor role up to that point so that there is trust. That's what won the day when I was talking. It wasn't that necessarily the alternative was so superior. It was just that we had built that relationship, so he trusted my instincts.
Sometimes when you're a contractor or freelance, marketing and creative, I always had a 3-strike rule.
Right.
The client asks for something not productive, not unethical, but unproductive. First time, it's like, I don't really think you want to do that. There's strike 1. Second time, I was like, are you sure you want to do this? The third time, they insist on getting it done. It's 3rd strike, and it's like, okay, the client wants to run marketing that's not going to be very effective. That's fine. Work. That's a completely different conversation than the client wants to do something unethical.
Absolutely. You don't get 3 strikes on that one. No.
You only get 1 because once you cross that line, everyone sees it.
And your credibility's shot. I mean, at that point,
you can destroy 10 years of good work in 10 seconds.
In 10 seconds. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So I think that this conversation about ethics is important. I'm glad that we're standing up and we're saying stuff about it and not just letting it go water under the bridge. Because if we are not ethical, we are not being productive, we're not being professional, we're not doing what we need to do, and it's about time folks heard the other side of the story.
And ultimately, it's going to benefit your career in the long run.
Yep.
The cream rises to the top, right? The best professionals, which includes your ethics, along with your talent, work level, etc., is going to elevate you. It's that in that moment, decision's hard, but the long term is always paid off. I've never ever seen someone be unhireable because their ethics are too high.
Right, and what's that mean anyway?
Can your ethics be too high?
Can your ethics be too high? No.
Right. You could be difficult to work with, I guess, but in that case, it's probably not ethic. It's probably decision making and some other things. But when it comes to straight ethics, let's say something that's untrue. Let's do something that we know is hiding information that we know if it came out would paint us in a different light. If you're doing something actively to change the conversation, and not in a opinion versus opinion, but a fact versus, That's a whole conversation you can never get back.
Well, and I was going to say earlier in this conversation, when did persuasion become such a bad word?
It's not. We all are looking for, how do I, whether it's buying a product, hiring a service, working with people, even the charities we want to give our money to, right?
Campaigns for health.
Right.
I mean,
We want to know what's happening with our economics. We want to know we're getting in a good deal. We want a relationship with the companies we do business with. And so the only way we can do that is to have information in the exchange of communication.
absolutely.
And that's why ethics is so important, because that exchange has to be honest, or else the consumer will have no confidence in anything they see.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is why I think sometimes people struggle with, the old adage of used car salesman.
Right.
I mean,
There's a reason there's so many
the
jokes about
reason
these cars.
there's so many jokes about them.
So you car guys, stop it.
Car guys.
Stop it.
Anyway, well, thanks. I just had to kind of get that off of my chest.
appreciate it.
It's a good time for that. I hope we'll continue to have this discussion as we go.
And I want to tell everyone that watching or listening to the podcast, you're watching the video, you're listening to the podcast, you can find us on social media, on our website, thegoldengroove.com, all the social media channels. If you have questions or scenarios, or you're like, I don't know if this is ethical, unethical, or not, literally reach out to us. We would love to help you figure this out and help you make the right ethical decisions. So hit us in the comments, however you're listening to this, and we will respond. Until next time, good luck.
Ciao.